1, 2, 3. Okay. I'll just I'm going to go over what we did last time just for a couple of minutes, and we'll go into the other room. Ki no myoyo, the miraculous functionings of ki, is the mother of subtle alterations in the breath. I'll repeat that because somebody just came in. Ki no myoyo is the mother of subtle alterations in the breath. Certain things you can't just hear once. Ki no myoyo is the mother of subtle alterations in the breath. Here is the origin of the love inherent in Bu. As one unifies body and mind through Ki no myoyo and enacts Aikido, subtle shifts in breathing occur, and Wada emerge freely in various forms. Okay? If you have this book, it's called A Life in Aikido. It's written by Kishomaru Ueshiba Sensei's son. It's a biography of his dad. And as opposed to the son, this is the son kind of putting out what his father said. Since somebody else came in, we're just going to focus on that one paragraph. Ki no myoyo is the mother of subtle alterations in the breath. Here is the origin of the love inherent in Bu. Bu meaning the martial. Okay, but since it wasn't just martial, it was really something about a motive force in creation. As one unifies body and mind through Ki no myoyo and enacts Aikido, subtle shifts in breathing occur, and Wada freely emerge in various forms. That's just one paragraph. Sometimes we go through a whole page. Ki no myoyo is the mother source of subtle alterations in the breath. Your breathing, as it goes into balance, becomes breath. Okay, now, little twist. It's a change right here. Ki no myoyo is the mother of subtle alterations in the breath. Here we are. Okay. So the breath may also be a gateway into what he calls Ki no myoyo. Here is the origin of the love inherent in Bu. What might that mean? Here we are. Very dense. World of matter, what Sensei called the Genkai. We're in a very dense dimension of the universe. The denser we are, the more the thought patterns of the eye just sort of keep going, and they keep us in this very dense state. And so, we talk about something called love, and it exists here. But going back towards the more original of ourselves, we also touch depth of what he might call love. And if we go through this, here is the origin of the love inherent in Bu. In other words, when you're here in this tight dimension of the universe, the Genkai, There's so much that goes on. Mind is way overactive when I'm talking about the I mind. Bruce Lee called the noisy mind. So there's love, but it's really warped and corroded by that density here, and also by the noise. Okay? As one unifies body and mind through Kino Myoyo and enacts Aikido. Now you go to the dojo, you put your gi on, you train with somebody, you're learning a lot about, the actual training and the movements, and also maybe social skills. But right there, he's tying enacting Aikido to something much deeper, much more original. Subtle shifts in breathing occur. Now he goes from breath to breathing. You are in the dojo, you are touching. Kino myoyo. And that's also the mother of what you would call subtle alterations in the breath. But as you're enacting it, then there are shifts in the way that you breathe. And Wada emerges freely in different forms. Okay? So I'm going to I'm looking for something which I don't have. Yes, I do have it. Okay, so what we're going to do since he talked a lot about it, two things right there, several things. The marvelous functioning of ki. There's ki in everything. We're just all solidified ki. We're very dense ki. In complicating matters, we're biologically dense ki. And when you take an original consciousness and you put it this dense, then there's this. And the dialogue here perpetuates the density. So, but we're much more than that. So if I can just sort of relax a bit, my breathing starts to deepen. As the breathing deepens, may not happen immediately, but I sense a change in my psyche. Instead of the noise up here, I'm shifting more into what appears to be a body feel, but it's more than that. Body feels freer. Whereas up here, everything might be kind of negative right now for good reason. It's kind of more of an optimism down here. There are bigger spaces between my breath in, breath out, breath. In fact, it's really the spaces between the out and the in. Air goes out, comes back in. Where breath occurs. And according to that little paragraph I read, subtle shifts in breathing. So all of a sudden I begin to notice a space between out and in and out. If I check back, I use the term psyche, which is a pretty big one. I might have a standard dialogue going on here about this and that, but it's probably still going on, but my attention is somewhere else. And I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but there's an out, in, out of my own breathing. But my environment seems to also have a kind of out, in, out. If I check back, my body doesn't feel dense. And therefore, a lot of that dialogue that's going on may be going on, but my attention is somewhere else. The denser I am, the more my breathing is probably kind of high and rushed. And the more I get caught up in this dialogue here, which is really what I is. As I start to just breathing, not breath yet. I start to notice there's a pause between in and out and in. Without, I go back up here when I try to figure it out. I get mental, I get tense again. So I try to stay in the experience of the body somehow feeling freer, easier. If I do that, my attention shifts, not so much from the to the space between this and that. And I don't know if my imagination, but I also sense the environment around me going out and in. And as I do that, this is calmer, this is freer. So that sense of mind and body is starting to kind of unify. Okay. Now what we're going to do is I'm checking for, because I need a prop. Okay. I'm going to go into the other room. So let's center this a little bit more. Get a better angle for a full body shot. Oops. Should have done this before class, but I was focusing a little bit on the breathing, so. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. It's got a pretty good full body shot. Okay. Now, one of the things I kind of want to mention about breathing, most of the time we go, somebody, for example, in this real dense world, breath runs out, somewhat in. In fact, I might go out and not taking the air in, and then all of a sudden I start to kind of feel tenser. So the breathing tends to be more what we call this way. Now, what we're going to do is an exercise, which I kind of just realized was quite a good one, which is we're going to begin to verticalize our breathing. Yeah, if we try to do that, I get too busy trying to verticalize it. So what we're really going to do I'm going to lie on the ground. Okay, I think I can do here. You'll see it. I'm going to put this on my lower belly. So if you have a phone or you have a book or you have anything that has a modest weight, you're going to put it on your lower belly. Okay, so, and yes, here I am. This here, yeah. I'm going to relax as completely as I can. Now, I feel that little modest weight, which is my cell phone, on my lower tummy. Breathe naturally. I breathe through the nose. I want you to feel that modest weight going up and down. Just observe it. Yeah. Observe, feel it, not like I'm going to. There's a natural rhythm. You're breathing. That we are just becoming more conscious of. And by lying on the ground, we are verticalizing the breath. It's going up and down, not in and out. Now, careful here. For a lot of times, if you're too under stress, carrying too much tension, there's too much density in your body, and your mind is way too active, you might sort of take a nap. That happens, that's cool. You'll wake up and go, what happened? But just feel, observe that little weight on your tummy, going up and down and up. Don't try to slow your breathing down or to take any more air in than you normally do. This is simply feel, observe. And I find, if I don't try to force it, weight goes down a little bit more and expands up. But it's something that happens when I just relax. And you might go, I can do that. Well, you're back in dense. And that dialogue in your head is running you. To be very easy with this. Open, feel, up and down, without forcing. And the up and down is because we are now laying horizontal. There's a natural up and a natural down without forcing. I'm kind of noting that my forehead, tension in my face, that I wasn't aware of, is starting to dissipate. I might have been carrying way too much tension in my jaw. That's starting to ease. See, my thoughts are still going on, but I'm not kind of, they're like a flash flood. I'm being swept away by them. Here I'm more like on some sort of a flotation in a calm lake. In fact, when I get that visualization, the breathing gets even more natural. It deepens. And check in, I'm talking, so I can't drift off. But we may go back to that. But what I'm going to do is, so I don't lose my cell phone, I'm going to put it in here. I'd like you to sit up. Today's all is fine, but sometimes we focus so much on what's going on in our legs and the discomfort that we go into that dense world. We got all these thoughts about it. Now what I'm trying to do, lying on my back, this became that. If you have something like this, you can hold it if you like. Breathing to my chest. Of course, it's going out. Breathing to my rib cage. Okay. I felt that weight on my lower tummy. So all of a sudden I'm breathing to the lower belly. And more than anything, I'm just observing. Observe, not just look at, but observe, feel. Most times we're out there checking. How am I doing? It's more of an interior observation, feel. Because I localized that area with my cell phone, it's very easy for me to pick up. Now we're verticalizing the breathing in a more vertical posture. Most people just go this way. Now you may or may not pick this up, and I don't know if I'm imagining this or not, but it's my own up, down are happening. Conscious of breathing or movement around. I go out there to study it, all of a sudden, I go up here, body densifies. I'm looking at it, I'm conscious of it, and that sort of okay, but stay with the feel experience of what you're observing. Good place to be is almost like it's breathing me. So breathing starts to get deeper, more natural. Whatever's going on up here, probably the thoughts are way up there going on, but I'm in a quiet, calmer space. And where we can begin to talk about mind and body unifying. Up there, a lot of times the body's just chasing the mind as it races around. So we get the feeling now that that breath is going deeper. So in other words, there's the body, there's other levels of body. So using a visual. So I can go all the way up there without getting heavier, denser, and starting to kind of get caught up in that flash flood of I thinking. And right here, this doesn't have to stop here. The elevator is still going down. And we not only started to verticalize, but we started to vertical horizontalize. So you may get symbols like a pyramid or a cross. That's where mystical signs come in. And if I put this down, you may not be able to do that initially, but you're in the experience field of something. So I don't need to hold a stick. And that's going on. And check back to the body field. I'm present, but I'm much more relaxed. And word of warning, when you start to go this much, if you're used being too dense inside, you start to, oh my God, which is generally what your body needs. It needs to rest. This has been too dense and this has been too out of control for too long. You're going to go for that. But I'm exact opposite of needing to take a nap right now. I'm really much more fully engaged in just being here. Okay, so we take a second or two, you get back up, you feel dizzy. Okay, just relax. Remember, you felt that area here. Now we're standing, we'll take a second or two and just let the breath start to verticalize. You could also, for example, this is something that Sensei used a lot. Spirals up, and the rightward spiral spirals down, and the left spiral. See, other than that, I'm getting a lot of exercise and I'm moving, I'm too dense. And I can't filter out the experience from my thoughts. From my I, noisy mind working. If you give the proper information to the I, noisy mind, the body is too dense, it just makes the whole thing into a form or a ritual. Right now, I'm sort of standing, being in the experience of. So all these movements, to some degree, are the movements of ki. I can talk about ki up there and I'll feel something. But now, right about here, I'm picking up a sound. Now there's a shift, upward. So just like you had this, and you have this, the right word is more for me an awe sound. The downward leftward is more. Haven't done much sound, but instead of being an outer sound, and they're more an interior. So we're going into movement because I'm moving. Now we're also going a little bit into what we call the up, down, establishing some sense of a center, but a lot of things going on. So we may go back to sound, but we're going to go a little bit more into motion. Okay. But before we do, I don't know if I've got like a couple of corpses out there, because when you start to do that initially, if your system, because when we're this dense, this runs out of control. And what's created in the system is stress. And when you start to kind of process a bit, what happens is you zonk out. Because it takes a lot of work to stay in this real dense state where this is like a flash flood. So as you open, and the breath is kind of a gateway. Breathing is a gateway to breath. Breath is a gateway to finer dimensions. As you reach the finer dimensions, you get out of the denseness of the body, more into the field of experience of the things that are much finer. So anybody out there with a comment, statement? Again, there are no wrong statements. Anybody? Did I put everybody to sleep?
We're here, Sensei.
Yeah, hi. Oh, good. I'm glad that. Anything you want to share about what that journey was?
I was making a lot of connections to things that I experience in my yoga practice. There are terms that we use like prana, meaning an upward energy, and apana, meaning a downward energy, that are very much part of the yogic pranayama breathing practices. And there's a lot of similarity to what you're doing, I think.
They might have talked about fire, water, or heaven, earth. Yeah. I mean, spiritual traditions use different metaphors, but they're probably based on archetypes, patterns, right? That to some degree transcend cultures. Okay? American culture is funny. It's more like everything wants to be kind of dense and successful and dominant. It's like the religion of American culture is more like football. Denser, bigger, faster, right? And so when you go into kind of the East, there are other spiritual traditions, right? And so, yeah, we kind of went into, and as you're breathing, a transition breathing to breath is to get you into finer dimensions. I still got a body. It still weighs the same. But when I'm kind of in a denser state with it, this is going way too fast. So just I'm getting a nice sort of up-down beat and balance. So that means that at least I'm a bit more centered. And my breath is more what it is I'm going in and out. But I feel that balance between the out, the in, and I verticalize it. So I'm kind of more in my center. All right, my movement becomes freer. Okay. So anybody else with a statement or question? Let me check. Yeah, we're fine. So we spent some time just on that that one little paragraph in there. Now, like you do, not just watch, but if you have something, I'm sticking with what would I call my prayer stick. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. I'm still doing staff spear movements with them. But notice the movement's freer. freer, freer. Oh. So the movement's checking that. The movement's coming off of more of an interior sense. So, these are fire, water, center circle changes. We can go into basic movements, up, down. You can use that as a sword form. Boom, 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 boom. I'm noticing I'm more of what I would call a breath state. So boom. Instead of, okay, I've got to do that movement better. It's like boom. Or I got to do that movement better, faster. Or just simply. Feeling on that one, for example, is that continues. Like boom, that continues. There's a kind of a reverberation, or we can do it this speed. It doesn't stop here. And it doesn't stop here. That doesn't stop. But it gathers. There's that space. Goes back out. That doesn't stop. So I'll become much more conscious of just even the act of breathing, which takes me finer, gets me out of dense. Right? So, I encourage you just to sort of move, let things unfold. If you're having trouble with this, just, you can go to what you know of the 30 movements. You may notice things as you're going through the pattern. And especially as you kind of go through the last 10 or so movements, you may. I'm noticing that, I carry a lot of heaviness in the movement. First, boom, boom, boom. Boom. You can speed it up without necessarily rushing or forcing getting heavier. In fact, if you try to take the heavy, dense aspect and try to make it faster, you're going to poke yourself or lose control out there. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom. Double movement here. Boom. So, start to move. Did some breath work. To take us to a different dimension. Come up with a different move or so. Boom, boom. That was for me a little different than what I know. Where did new discoveries come from? They come as we get a little bit more, we shift out of the dense state. Ah. for example, here to here is a shift here, but we go like that is right. I'm too heavy. I go this way, I go this way, I go. And I try to make that better, but I don't go that way, man. So again, but since it says things, Wada emerges freely. Boom. These changes emerge freely. Freely. Boom. Boom. Right? And today we just started with breathing. Which is still going on. And I start to get a little too dense. In other words, I'm thinking too much about what's out there or trying to prove out there. I'm just going to go back to breath. Or breathing to breath. And check the body. Body feels looser, freer, but we're capable of or slowing things down. Okay. Anybody notice what you're saying? Losing? Does it? And it emerge freely when you're in this state. Anybody with a statement or question or observation? As I said, there's almost nothing you can say that's wrong. Anybody?
I'm noticing, Sensei, this is Cliff.
Yeah, hi, Cliff.
Hi, I'm noticing that the breathing, when I'm doing movements, not just the 30 minutes, but freestyle, that my breathing, I'm noticing the integration of my breathing and my moving more than I normally do.
Yeah. Well, I would venture to guess your movement is much freer. Less thinking about and having to do it out there, and more like letting it sort of emerge from that state of balance. Breathing, subtle changes in breathing are sort of gateway to finer dimensions. We kind of feel that because the movement's finer, which means the body's finer, which means my mental state is less noisy mind-eye and more calmer, more integrated state. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom. So is that somewhere in the neighborhood for you, Cliff?
Yeah, we're having the kids are being a little bit disruptive right now, or how calm I am, but I am noticing integration.
Well, that's the world. In fact, if you take your black belt test someday, we're going to give you a couple of people running at you, for a multiple attack, and that'll really be the same. All right. And so at that particular point, being able to move more free, shift your attention. That's also a check, right? Because things will demand your attention. And the better we can stay in this state, the better we deal with them. This is not just for this time. It's not just yoga time, okay? But it's this is supposed to help us deal with this and that, and I'm calmer. I can start to see possibilities that I can't when I'm too dense, and this is going on too fast. expression, can't see the forest for the trees. Keep bumping into trees looking for forest. Well, what's going on? I'm just too dense. I'm just getting in my own way. So subtle shifts in breathing. And Sensei is, what he calls the ki no myoyo. Not just ki. All right. We're very dense ki, and we're even more complex because we're biological matter, dense. But we also exist in other realms, self, soul, spirit, even other words like that. So, where am I? Executing, but I'm too tense and out there. I'm gonna calm down. Shift into my breathing as a gateway. Aware that my hips are looser, freer, as opposed to frozen. See, from here I can execute changes like that. When I'm here, I'm too busy moving from here to here. Okay, in basketball, a horrible defender is somebody like this. A good defender can move, boom, boom, adapt, get an angle, cut off somebody. Just because they blow by you doesn't mean you can't adjust and reestablish a defensive position, make them shoot or make them pass in a position they don't want to. I mean, it's not basketball, but it's change. Boom, boom, you look at it. Handle things like that. See, what happens is as we're denser, this gets really fast. The mind gets really too clogged up with its own mental activity. Okay? So if we got to move fast, everything jams up. But if we kind of have this, then what happens is things speed up. All this activity. I'm still kind of somewhat grounded in that finer dimension where this is slowed down enough that that increased speed doesn't throw me off. Okay? So, anybody else with anything about that? Boom, 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 boom. I'm aware, for example, here, if this were sharp, I can blend with that. I can create also my own attack and just my own off the line blend with it. If I were to check, body feels looser, freer, mind calmer. And Cliff, if the kids are there, just go work the pattern sometime when you have a little bit more private time. What was it? Not just the memory of it, but this experience is going on at any time. Oops. Now, a lot of times there's a flurry of activity. Well, I get too caught up out there with it, but right here, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. See when I kind of, okay, now I'm too caught up in back and forth here, but really it's a spiral. Points on a spiral. And it's not just arms, but the hips are moving in a way that boom, 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 moving the hands. And the point, boom, 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 out there. But I can also go, okay. feeling that space. See, we can all challenge, right? In the midst of dealing with children or the pandemic or whatever. We can all start to come from a finer dimension of who we are, calmer, more ground. So all that stress kind of bottling up, this energy, let it flow a bit. How we do that is we're taking all that energy, becoming more creative with it. Becoming more creative with it, more creative with it, more creative with it. Okay? Conscious of the fact there are, as I align to energies or that breath inside, there are wave movements inside, but there are also wave movements outside. Okay? In fact, martial arts, there's in Kung Fu, there's something called, the drunken monkey style. Boom, 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 boom. And, there's a great Jackie Chan movie where he is a practitioner of it. And to really fight well, he's got to get drunk. But, when he's, being drunk and boom, he can kind of move in ways, just boom, that, boom, boom, because it's a broken rhythm. Somebody coming in instead of, okay. So you're conscious as you free up in here, things out there start to kind of loosen up for you. Now, right at this particular point, I start to go like that. Well, that's one reason why we have ukemi. So, there are forces and energies out there, which part of it is, what's that? Well, so we densify, we cut ourselves off from it. Some go, oh, what's that? Well, as you kind of start to get a finer level of yourself as the center, the body gets a little finer, then there are accompanying energies out there. Whenever you have a center, you have a circle. Boom, 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 boom. And if you're a little too orthodox, boom, this way you miss a lot of that. Boom, boom, boom. Whoa, 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 whoa. So, anybody with observation? Anybody with anything to be noting there? Sometimes the vocabulary is like, for example, the drunken monkey style. Boom, 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 boom. It looks like you're totally like, but boom, boom. No. See, sometimes we're so busy being good that you don't realize that the basis of some people get caught up in being good and they just absolutely don't know that greatness, it's a big term, you can't get to be great by being good. Okay, there was a football player. He was a guy named Michael Vick. Okay, he was an African American quarterback. Eventually he had issues because he was, he was setting up dog fights for money. Okay, so he got kind of put in prison and a lot of that stuff. But I just remember one time I was watching, highlights, and he was very athletic. I mean, he could throw the ball 80 yards for a touchdown, or he could run 80 yards for a touchdown. And what happens? He got trapped in the pocket by 3 guys that were just going to kill him. And what happened is, he didn't instead of like this or trying to escape, he just went, like something, lost control. He did something that was totally, not a football movie, but he just went, and then, he that was so unexpected, they didn't know what to do. He ran to the sidelines, went up the sidelines for a touchdown, 60 to 70 yards. It was kind of like, the drunken monkey took over for a second. And then, he had his instincts, okay, run across the field, you run to the sideline, and everybody has to get an angle to catch you. And he was so athletic, nobody was going to catch him. Okay? So sometimes, you're so good at being orthodox that, there are other, this looks kind of goofy. Don't go to the dojo and start doing that stuff. But there's an area right here where somebody who's quite good, they have a lot of that freedom that we call the drunken monkey archetype. Boom, 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 boom. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to move back into the other room. Okay. And just something. I'm going to adjust this for a bit. Something I was noticing. That motion. I'm getting better at swinging. I'm going to a finer state through my breathing. See, get too out here, you get too dense. You get better out there. Finer state. Now, the tendency is, okay, I'm going to swing and get denser and stronger. Freer, easier. Okay, so the boken is often done as a practice of densifying, thickening. Okay, but it also is a check. I think, since they probably swung the sword a lot, but on the other hand, his purpose of doing weapons and sword, as he kind of transformed, was probably different. So we're going to go over that paragraph, just one paragraph. And this is a repeat. Somebody came in. Let's just check. Okay, so we have an audience. That's good. And this is 189 in the Nidai, second Doshu's book about his father. Ki no myoyo is the mother of subtle alterations in the breath. So we're not saying do something radical like breathe in for 2 minutes, breathe out for 2 minutes, or hold your breath for an inordinate amount of time. Because it's subtle alterations in the breath. Here is the origin of a love inherent in Buddha. Well, let's just say the out breath represents a primal force. And the in breath is another primal force, Izanagi to Izanami, Amaterasu to Sana, whatever you want to call it. Light, dark, fire, water, heaven, earth. Breathing out, breathing in are both connected by breath. As you breathe out, the finer state picks up, there's a pause, not a stop. Breathe in to a pause, not a stop. As you continue to get finer, that pause grows. You still breathe out and in, that's breathing. But the breathing then becomes a gateway to something you might call breath. And then he's talking about subtle changes in breath, which means the breath is a gateway to finer dimensions. Instead of going like that motion. I remember, I can't remember what it was my first year in Aikido. And there was something that went on, and then they did No Sensei. You know, those days it was all home movies. And they did something where they tried to slow down the movement to study what he was doing. A lot of people would do that and burn the film. But this one guy said, yeah, you know, we were watching O-sensei in slow motion and his hand moved like that. It was slow motion and boom, his hand moved like that in slow motion. Boom, like super speed. And I went, that's interesting. So even in slow motion, there was a finer dimension of something which you call speed, which registered as speed, even though everything else was slowed down. So people try to understand what he was doing. They saw that and it was like, wow. So, you know, the subtle, the exalted usages of ki. Boom, okay, he could do things. We're all ki anyway, but we're maybe cut off from the exalted uses of ki by, you know, the density of the realm we're in, which is the, you know, physical reality, genkai. And when we're in that dense state physically, the mind races way too fast and gets trapped out there in various things. And so breathing to breath becomes a gateway into finer levels. And there's, you know, you use the body a lot. Body feels freer, but we don't get that. All of a sudden, the mental activity of the I that's programmed into it is still going on, but we're at a deeper level. Okay? And the breath connecting the out to the in to the out of breathing is connected to what he calls love. Love is what binds this and that, what keeps this and that working together to harmonize. And of course, love is also an emotion feeling, which we have in these very dense bodies, and we have a lot of theories about them. But when he was talking about love in Bu, my sense, he was talking about that attraction, that fundamental peace that holds everything together. Okay? As when it unifies body and mind through ki no myoyo and enacts Aikido, Subtle shifts in breathing occur and Wada emerge freely in various forms. That's what we're trying to do in the other room, just with the staff and doing a little bit of free form. If you can't free form, just go into the 30 movements from that finer level of you. And no changes. Okay? So let me go back to, yeah, okay, this is the previous page. In short, ki no myoyo, and he kind of in parentheses, it's defined as the exalted use of ki, allows individuals to harmonize their own mind and body, as well as coming into harmony with the greater universe. If one fails to enact ki no myoyo, poor physical and mental health may result. Eventually the world, even the universe, fall out of order. Sounds like this country right now, especially after 4 years, previous 4 years. Okay? For this reason, both world order and world peace crucially rely on the harmony between ki, mind and body on one hand, and on the other, the movements of the greater universe. That was on the previous page, and so it connects a little bit what we just said. So when he was really talking about, of course, take political action where necessary. But he's also saying that, the action we take hopefully starts to come from a place that where the mind, our mind, body, and ki are unified. And then we start to get in touch with ki no myoyo, the exalted usages of ki. And what happens when we stay dense, we get trapped in this I, busy mind, whatever it is. Can't see the forest for the trees place. Words like love in this dense state oftentimes create pain, okay? And possessiveness. We can be played very easily. If you love your country, then storm the Capitol, something like that. You see what I mean? There's a funny area right there. And if we don't have the balance, and the mind, body, and ki, and he's really talking about also getting into harmony with the greater universe. Okay? And that's, he seems to hint, what he did is he was one with the universe. Okay? And that probably doesn't happen without what he calls ki no myoyo. And so today what we did is we just went through some, basic breath practices, which you can try on your own. If you just lie down on your back, put a modest weight on your lower tummy and feel it going up and down. Don't try to make it, just observe, feel. Don't try to make it do anything. And then, we just took it where we stood and the breath continued to verticalize as we were vertical. How do you feel when you sit? How do the Aikido movements feel? Because, the whole purpose of that, it gets you into a finer level. We're not caught so much in the density of the body. Therefore, the mind is free of kind of like what you call the I and its limited range of thinking. And we may start to pick up there's a whole universe of movement out there which can sync up to our movement. And when we're in that state, I think we're in a very healthy state. We're more into, a sense of wonder, a sense of beauty, which are really important. And when I'm in there, my vital sense of being alive is much different than when I'm in a dense state and this is going crazy. Again, something that I've been kind of talking about is, the theme song to the TV show, The Big Bang Theory. The universe was in a hot, dense state. And 14 billion years ago, expansion started. Wait. The wait is really important. Okay, why was it so hot and dense? Everything was in this one point. Then, 14 billion years ago, it expanded out from that point, but it was still really hot and dense as it went out. And it's easy to get caught up in, and that's the whole thing right there, is we did get caught up. Everything's hot and dense. We couldn't physically exist there, but we existed as part of an original consciousness. And it couldn't stay in that one point. It was just a little bit, so it went going to Osensei. 14 billion years ago, expansion started. Wait. Then it jumps. The earth began to cool. Autotrophs began to drool. Microorganisms, single cell, that create their own food so they can keep sustaining, and that's we evolved. If you're a total biblical Christian, I'm sorry. Autotrophs began to drool and created food, evolved into eventual Neanderthals, developed tools. We built the wall. We built pyramids. Tools allowed us to be more than just extensions of single cells. Science, math, and history to unravel the mystery that started with a Big Bang. So why the wait? It goes out there, it starts to cool. Everything starts to get dense again. And we started out, boom, as a part of an original consciousness that could exist when things were in a hot, dense state, much more than it's like, wow, what's it like to live inside a star? Probably worse than that. $14 billion years ago, things started to expand. Good. Wait. Remember, you're part of that original design of creation as a part of that original consciousness. And then, several, whatever it is, the earth starts to cool. Things starts to get dense again. It's very easy. If you don't wait, you forget. And you start to get denser along with things. And from single-celled organisms, you get Neanderthals, you get tools, and then there's science, math. They built walls and pyramids, and science, math, and history, but all of a sudden you're still going into dense. But the science, math, and history is supposed to help you unravel the mystery that started with the Big Bang. So what started with the Big Bang? Well, we started to disentangle and individuate as different elements within that original consciousness. And therefore, we come here, we get a physical body, we're a kind of a soul, spirit, self in a body, which is very dense, and we're in biological matter that came out of the autotrophs drooling. And here we are, and we're in this dense state. So as we use the breath to go back to a more original, a finer state. This clears. Wait. And no sense they made it all the way back, a journey through consciousness, but also through space-time, to that wait place. That's where he discovered the whole thing about the point in Sioux. I don't think anybody told him, look, study physics and then make up your own thing about it. I don't think that was the case. I think it was Sensei went all the way back. He kind of went finer and finer, and the universe around him showed him more and more how things were, where we're going back to the beginning. So finally he went, oh my God, this is hot and dense, and boom, Sioux, and it starts. And I'm here, not just as a body, but as a consciousness, apart from this larger consciousness. And so what happens as everything expands out? It's still held together by love or boo. And therefore, at that original act of creation, the Big Bang, that started with the Big Bang or a Big Bang, there was the marvelous functioning of ki that existed along with the original consciousness. And arguably, we're in something called non-being. You can call it chaos. The universe can't exist in non-being. So at some point, whatever was there, the materials of it, non-materials, whatever, goes into that point. It's hot and dense, creating a great space, consciousness. And then the Big Bang. But again, that little crazy little theme song, wait, or else you get caught up in this, and it goes like this. And we're caught up here, and we're a 12-year situation comedy. And unfortunately, in this world, there's a lot other than comedy. We're caught up in this denseness. And we're stressed because in this dense state. So expansion started, wait. We're still a part of that original consciousness that starts to kind of individuate into more separate consciousnesses. But then we start to go out, it's expanding. But the earth begins to cool, the universe starts, it can't just keep going that way. Okay, there's got to be something called dark matter because it just keeps going out. No, it holds itself together. But in this form of holding itself together, there's dark energy. There's still an expansion. And that's all theoretical physics, okay? But, the universe is still evolving, but it has something that binds it so it doesn't just go. And, one way of looking at it is that that's love. And as we go back more towards the original of that, we start to experience ourselves more as part of that original consciousness. Bodies could not exist in that original hot, dense state. Gravity, electromagnetism, space-time couldn't exist. Boom. But 14 billion years ago, expansion started. Whoa, wait. Because all of a sudden the earth begins to cool and autotrophs begin to drool and the Neanderthals create tools. And of course, we got science, math, and history to explain the mystery, but we don't pay attention to that. Well, Sensei did. He said, I'm not teaching religion, I'm teaching spiritual science. As he got finer, he went back more towards the original. The universe started, as he started to do this, started to talk about itself. He realized there were energies out there that he could communicate with. He called them kami. Okay. In fact, he could converse with them. They would be his allies. That was all part of the ki no myoyo, And the way we're looking at it is that we use breath as a gateway to kind of travel back to the, to before, almost like the before of the Big Bang. Okay, so if you watch that show, fine. If you just don't know what I'm talking about, Google the Big Bang Theory's theme song, you get the lyrics. But basically things like Amatsu no Rito and everything, they're just talking about the forces of creation, where it started. Takamaharami mototsumio yasumeo kami, the high plane of heaven, a beginning place for creation, omototsume no omikami, the gathering of an original spirit. Kamburoki, kamburomi, it just goes through that. Okay, now the Big Bang Theory theme song might be easier for you than learning classical Japanese. Why did I learn it? Because Hikizuchi Sensei chanted it all the time. And then years later, I kind of learned that. My third stay there, I'm in the dojo in Shingu, and this is debatable, but O-sensei comes to me and says, learn the Kamigoto, and you'll always have a connection to me. The Kamigoto is the Yomatsu no Rito kind of multiplied by warp speed. It's much longer, much more. But it took me about 9 months, which I had, and I learned the Kamigoto. Okay. But all of those are really the unfolding of creation from an original place. You can call it Amino Kihashi, you can call it the high plane of heaven, Takamaharani Mototsumi. But what I found was interesting was I'm back here in, I think, 1974, Mary Haney Sensei and I think we went to San Francisco for something. And maybe she wasn't there, I can't remember. I think she wasn't there. I think she was already in Seattle, expanding the Seattle School of Aikido. But I went up to San Francisco with Robert Fraser Sensei and Osawa Sensei, the senior Osawa Sensei from Hombu Dojo was there. And he kind of did a demo, and Fraser Sensei and I did a demo. I was the UK, okay? And what happened there is he brought a film, and it was an NHK documentary of O-sensei in his later years in Iwama. But O-sensei does Amatsu no Rito. The whole thing takes a bit longer. And I realized is that, his breath patterns and his intonations are what Hikizuchi Sensei did. And then later, I read this article by Abe Sensei, who was another person, Hikizuchi Sensei, Abe Sensei. They both paid a lot of attention to O-sensei, as opposed to just training in the techniques. Tohei Sensei was good. He kind of took a lot of the principles and he kind of tried to kind of popularize it without going into kind of like of it. Okay, which is fine. People get something out of it. Think about, what keep one point, extend key, and then that's good. Okay, I'm not saying that's anything that's bad about it. But there was an area where I went, wow. And so Abe Sensei in an article said his breath practice was doing the chants with as much as he could the same intonations and pauses that those sensei did. That was his breath practice. So the Norito, if you just learn the words, and one thing I noticed is that when O-sensei chanted Norito, because you would hear the same Norito at Shinto shrines, and there's a way, and that's the way that it was chanted by the Shinto priests. And those senseis breath and sound, anata no kamigami o tsutoyete. Okay? It was very different. And then if you want to check it out, go onto YouTube and put Deguchi Onisaburo Norito in. And it's, it doesn't show him, but it's a recording of him doing that Amatsu Norito. And they're not exactly the same. Well, sensei is sensei, but you could say that basically the Gucci sensei and O sensei, when they're chanting the Norito, they are invoking ki no myoyo in the subtle aspects of breath. And so, the lineage, Deguchi, Monisaburo, Morihei Shiba. And then, I actually did meet Abe Sensei a couple of times. He was pretty far out. But mainly Hikizuchi Sensei, when I was there, he chanted it every morning. Okay. You were there. And then, thank Mary Heine Sensei, because she wrote it out for me. She also wrote Kamigoto out, which took her a long time. And I practiced. I learned the Amatsu Norito more, I think, when I was back. Because one thing Hikizuchi Sensei would do, he spent in 74 a whole month at my parents' house. And he taught in Santa Cruz and moved around the area and taught various schools, which were just opening at that point. But, you bring somebody, Hikizuchi Sensei gets the guest room. I get kicked out of my own room because he brings Sugawa from the Shingu, from the Shingu Hungu Dojo as his bag carrier. Okay. And so, I wind up on the couch. And every morning, my mom, what she did is she kind of put this Buddhist altar in the living room where I was crashing on the couch. And every morning he would come out and he would start doing the chanting. And of course, when he would come out, I would go there and I would be like that. And so there was quite a bit of transmission that went into that. Okay. And so, the level of breath and sound, I don't know how much of that really comes across, how much ki no myoyo I have, but there's a lot of transmission in that. Nado Sensei, for example, he really doesn't like the Shinto stuff. He sort of has his own sort of view of the universe, which is kind of based on his contact with O Sensei. But my particular thing, goes back more towards, the stuff with Hikizuchi Sensei and listening to the Norito and then practicing it on my own. And I was just amazed, that when Osawa Sensei brought this, it's available now. It's an NHK documentary. And for me, the most important part of that is it gives a certain sections where Sensei is chanting Amatsu Norito before the Aiki Jinja in Iwama. And it was like, wow. Now, you individualize it. So, my intonations and everything I follow, even though the basis for it, I sort of got from Hikizuchi Sensei. I kind of listened to O Sensei, and so I kind of follow his patterns. I mean, if I listen to trumpet players, I'll follow a little more closely Chet Baker's changes than Miles Davis changes. Just the way we are. It's just something in your own system. But I kind of amp it up from a little bit what Hikizuchi Sensei did to be more like O Sensei, and it was a real trip listening to Deguchi Sensei chant the Norito. See, if we kind of go through that, I don't know, you're still here. So この腹に元つめあやすめお神。元の神々をつとえてことはにかみずまれます。かむらぎかむらみなみことまちて。かむいざなぎのみこと。つくしのぎむかの立ち花のどのあかぎがはらに。急ぎ払いたも時になりまする。ハワイドの狼たちもろもろのまがごと積み汚れを払いたまえ。清めたまえとまおすことのよしを。天つかみ、国つかみやほよろずの神たちともに。米のふちこまの耳振り立てて、聞こしめせとかしこみも回す。こんながらとまちはいますこんながらとまちはいます。What I noticed, about the way that Hikizuchi Sensei did it, I didn't catch so much. It was Takamagahara. That's the high plane of heaven where the exalted Amatsukami, the heavenly kami, hang out. But it was more like Om Mahani. It started, I thought it started with an ah, like oh, all right. And at the very end, of course, that's the Su chant, right? And so, I mean, I have a certain facility, I guess, for being able to follow changes in intonations and everything. Okay. And I have a certain sort of fascination with words. I remember, one of my favorite films for a long time was Underworld. And, it was Kate Beckinsale. It was kind of like my heir to Dame Diana Rigg a little bit. It was in the Avengers. And so I learned, the bell tower soliloquy, where she's talking about the war between the vampires and the werewolves. And so I learned it, right? And a friend of mine named Mary Ann, she was drama critic for the local San Jose Metro. And so I started reciting the bell tower soliloquy. And she says, yeah, but that's not Kate. And I said, oh, then it must be Diana Rigg. Well, there's certain ways where, I would hear Diana Rigg on the Avengers or in playing Shakespeare, and her speech was like, Kate Beckinsale went to war, had all put crown to a hole to the blink of an eye. And Diana Rigg, the war had all but crown to a hole at the blink of an eye. Lucien, the most feared and ruthless leader ever to rule the Lycan clan, and finally been killed. And so there was a part of me that picked up some of her diction. And, I don't know if I can still do it, but she had a soliloquy as Helena in Midsummer Night's Dream. And I learned that just because I love the sound of her voice and the way that she kind of used sound. It was a little bit like when Chet Baker plays music or Stephen Curry dribbles a basketball. She was active as an actress well into her 80s before she passed on last year. And, being nominated for Emmy Awards and everything. And think about that. Because, she was a classically trained Shakespearean actress who got on a spy show where she played a very futuristic woman. All these women now you see, like Scarlett Johansson, where they're dressed up in like combat suits and everything, they all come out of Diana Rigg and Mrs. Peel in the Avengers show. She was like, wow. That changed my whole life, really watching that show. But, that's something, I don't know that was so conscious, but, I kind of picked up something from her about diction, although I do not speak in a British accent. Okay. But, when Hikizuchi Sensei was doing the Norito, I kind of sort of ingested some of that. And then when I heard Sensei do it, I went, wow. And then if you listen to the Gucci, it's even wower. Neither of them. They play it like jazz musicians. And you go, they do not sound like Shinto priests at all. When they're chanting that Norito, they're somehow enacting Ki no myoyo through the subtle changes in breath that it takes to produce those sounds. And so, that part of it is difficult. These days, nobody wants to learn that stuff. I remember David and I, we went to Kauai a couple of times, and I think the last one was 2018. And, I had a group there, and, we trained at the beach, and I would do the Norito and the Kamigoto. And I think it was just David and Harry Concepcion, since everybody went to stayed for it. Everybody else went to shop and get ice cream. And that's okay. You see what I mean? It's like, because, that stuff was not popular when O Sensei was alive. People dreaded it. I mean, for me, it was a little bit like, I came from California and read the Castaneda books, and, Robert Fraser, Robert Nadeau Sensei were my first influences. So we really got into it. O Sensei is much more than a Japanese Budo teacher. So, part of me, and I didn't know what it was, but I kind of knew when Hikizuchi Sensei was chanting, there was a gateway that was being opened up. And, that was a lot of the teaching. In fact, Ono Sensei once said that he felt everything in Aikido was in that Amatsu Norito. Not the physical movements, but the changes in breath, sound. Ki no myoyo. Okay? And, and O Sensei was right. The world, his view of the world was very enlightened, shamanistic view. And what happens these days? A shamanistic view takes into account nature and the forces of creation. The universe is not a set fact. I mean, if you go back into the Big Bang Theory, the universe was in a hot, dense state. That's measurable. If you check back, scientists have found that out. And 14 billion years ago, they can measure all that crazy stuff by how far light has traveled. Expansion started. But they say, wait. And then all of a sudden, everything went fast. The Earth began to cool, which means the whole universe started to kind of get denser. And autotropes and Neanderthals and walls and pyramids and science, math, and history. But wait, there's a mystery that started with the great Big Bang, whatever it is. And so, as much as, I'm just sort of joking that you might want to, it's easier to kind of follow that than it is to learn the classical Japanese. I mean, I don't even understand the classical Japanese. I just kind of do it because there's a feel for things like Ki no myoyo and subtle changes in breath. Difference between Miles Davis and Chet Baker, there's a lot of difference in terms of breath. Davis is probably a bit of a trumpet player, but Baker has a lot of what O Sensei had. And, a lot of people downplay him because he had a drug problem. But then again, a lot of the musicians did. And a lot of times when you're that close to that, there's a lot of tension there. And one thing that Art Frank, one of Baker's best friends, said is, Art, was a drummer, strong hands, bodybuilder, boxer. And he could take steel spikes and bend them. And so he would go around and talk to power lifters, NFL football players, see if they could bend these steel spikes, right? And they couldn't. And so one day, there was Chet Baker, who was 5'10", 130 pounds, very thin. He played the horn. Didn't work out. Maybe did a push-up every once in a while, according to, something I read. And I was saying, Chet, I can bend these steel spikes, and a lot of NFL players and and powerlifters can. So Baker went, "Oh, you mean like this?" And I went, "Art, how do you do that?" And Art said, "Well, most people don't realize this, but he was physically one of the most powerful guys I ever met. He was really small. I mean, he's 5'10", but he was like 130 pounds." And then Art looked at me, got very serious. He says, "I don't know how he did it, Jack, but I suspect it was something to do with breath." And one thing that Baker, I played one of the Baker songs. I sent it to somebody who was a big fan of his, lady named Lucille, and she says, "I like the way that you bend the sounds." And I said, "What do you mean?" And I listened to what I sent her. And for example, trumpet players, they go, it's like a vibrato, right? But Baker doesn't do that. His sounds kind of bend. And if you go back to the Norito, sensei doesn't go like a Shinto priest. He goes, which I would assume he got from Deguchi sensei, who went even more extreme than O sensei did. And they were working through sound and breath, the subtle, exalted usages of ki. So, that part of it is being lost, unfortunately. In fact, Linda Holiday sensei tried to teach the Norito to a bunch of her students, and all the students did was go, "Kamaharani mata tsumiya yatsume." So, they started to chant it like a Shinto priest. And the changes are really important. I mean, that's what you call a direct transmission. And most people hated it. Most people left during the chanting, just like, the trip to Kauai. David Sensei and Harry Sensei gutted it out, or just were attracted enough to it. But the other members of the party, they went and got ice cream and went shopping, which is cool. But there's something about when the sacred comes up that way. Sometimes it's just, it's like, whoa. I want to, Nado Sensei used to use the term milkshake mentality, because he would have these meditation groups, and he would just he would go to some real fancy place. And, he would say, well, let's just stay here and soak in it for a bit. And they'd say, no, we feel like going out and getting a milkshake. So they would leave. In fact, I don't think anybody here was there, but 2006? Yeah, many moons ago. They take a group, or Nado Sensei takes a group to Hombu Dojo. And it's a week stay. I brought a group from Santa Cruz, and we did the first half of the week in Tokyo at Hombu Dojo. And then we went to southern Japan to be with Ano Sensei at the Shingu Dojo. But the Wednesday was a day where everybody went to the Aiki shrine in Iwama. And so I hadn't been in years. I went in 1973 and spent about 5 days there. But, going with a group. And that evening we were supposed to come back because we had dinner with Doshu, Sandai, third Doshu, Moriteru sensei. And so we go there, right? And we're right there in the and so I asked Lauren Hare Sensei, says when we asked Mr. Isoyama Sensei, he was the guardian now after Saito Sensei of the Aiki Jinja, if I can chant Amatsu Norito. Because I'm getting all these energies, to chant. Okay. And so Lauren goes up there and asks and says, of course. In fact, Isoyama Sensei let us go into the interior shrine as a group, and there was probably 50 people, so we all somehow got in there. But Nado Sensei says, Jack, before you chant, let me. And so I said, of course. So he goes there, and Sensei talking to him, Sensei actually asked him once, said, Nado, do you know the old sounds? Which means, the Amatsu Norito, the Kamigoto. And Nado Sensei said no. And Sensei said, okay, you don't have to know them to understand Aikido. All right. Different culture. Find your Aikido in your own way. You don't have to copy these sounds. But I learned the old sounds from being with Hikizuchi Sensei. So Nado Sensei did learn the Su chant. So, Su. So he chants that. And then I do the Amatsu Norito, which I did earlier. And then what happens is that all of a sudden we get a visitation. It's like Sensei comes out. It's like, and everybody there picks it up. We don't have to say, wow, this is pretty cool. And we're just wanting to sit there and soak in it, right? And then, the people in charge of the shrine come up, lunch. And so we have to leave and eat lunch. In fact, they were kind of like lunch. And so, Nado Sensei and I had a talk about that later. And he says, yeah, people can't handle that, especially that generation. Nado Sensei had that effect on people. It's like, and there we go. Or, let's go shopping and eat ice cream. And that's okay. There's a human response to it. But when he's talking about saving the world, so to speak, he's also referencing interior transformation and ki no myoyo. Anyway, it's a lot later than I expected. I'm glad you all stayed. I didn't hold you hostage. But I think there's a lot of transmission that went on. We did the Amatsu Norito, and some of these stories, even though they're just stories, they're kind of, there's, the way in the Don Juan's books, Don Juan would tell Carlos, this has power. And so, like the Norito, when it's done properly, Kino Myoyo coming in, there's power. Most people run. The sacred actually is not comfortable unless you get to a certain level of balance with yourself. So I thank everybody that was here today. And I'm going to let you go because I know what it's like to get trapped this way. But that's where I learned a lot of stuff in Shingu was, all of a sudden you're trapped with Hikizuchi Sensei for a couple of hours. And you go, boy, that's hard. But you find that part of you has grown from it. So thank you all. Okay.
Thank you, Sensei.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sensei.
You take care. What's next Wednesday? Remember Thursday night. Tomorrow night's Tai Chi. Okay, 7:30, 8:30.
Got it. All right. Bye, everyone.
See ya. Good seeing everyone. See you, David.
Bye-bye.